Hello everyone, this is Congressman Keith Ellison, and I'm coming to you with a message about our country, our whole nation's history, and it has to do with that segment of our nation's history known as African American History Month. February is African American History Month, and because African American history is ultimately American history, it's important to visit our nation's history to understand that this nation has been made great by a wide range of people, including African Americans. Negro History Week was the first form of African American History Month that we see today. It was established in 1926 by a great historian named Carter G. Woodson, and he established it because he felt that it was important to mark the history of African American people and talk about the contributions of the so-called Negro, an anachronistic term common in his day. He did that because before that time, it was common and racism was so intense in America that acknowledging the contributions of black people was actually quite a novel thing. And in fact, it was not uncommon in the 1920s and before that for pseudoscientific theories to abound that compared African Americans to lower forms of animals and things like that. I remember reading as a college student a book entitled The Negro, a Beast. And this was offered as legitimate scholarship at the time. Anyway, Carter G. Woodson established Negro History Week. We now today have African American History Month. And I think it's important, and I want to urge everyone of whatever cultural, ethnic, or national background to delve into the contributions African Americans have made to this whole country. Take, for example, the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which we'll celebrate this year in July. The 1964 Civil Rights Act prohibited discrimination in various areas of life, including employment, in areas of public accommodations and other important aspects of life. And it did so on behalf of a wide range of Americans far beyond simply African Americans. It prohibited discrimination in the area of sex, national origin, color, all types of things which benefit people who may or may not identify as African Americans. The history of the 1964 Civil Rights Act is a glimmer and a glimpse in the moment of American history, but it was a key one. Because our nation, which was founded in liberty, dedicated to the idea that all men and women are created equal, really, that was simply an aspiration when those words were spoken. It wasn't the reality of people's lives. But it was things like the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which made things like our Pledge of Allegiance and the Declaration of Independence actually reflect some reality. The 1964 Civil Rights Act has also a Minnesota connection. It was Hubert H. Humphrey, who had been instructed and advised on civil rights by African Americans in Minneapolis, such as Cecil B. Newman and Nellie Stone Johnson, who was charged with shepherding the 1964 Civil Rights Act through the Senate after a 54-day filibuster by Southern obstructionists. But Hubert H. Humphrey, was able to do that, and ultimately we did have a vote on the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It was a tumultuous, tough period of our history, and would not have happened but for the legal battles that preceded it. People like Charles Hamilton Houston, former dean of Howard Law School, fought and helped to end legal segregation in the area of the white primary and restrictive covenants. And then ultimately in the 1954 case of Brown versus Board of Education. But then the popular struggle took over, and it was led by people like Martin Luther King. But Martin Luther King, if he were here today, would tell you that he was just one of a whole multitude of people who were protesting segregation throughout the South. He was inspired by an activist and leader by the name of Rosa Parks, who had been active in civil rights activity for many years before, but on one fateful day just refused to give up her seat to a white patron on a bus, and so sparked the Montgomery bus boycott of 381 days. And then, of course, there were legal measures, things like the 1957 Civil Rights Act, the 1960 Civil Rights Act. None of these things could do the trick. They were all basically half measures, but it was in 1964, that Civil Rights Act, which basically changed the frame of American civil rights and a year later the 1965 Voting Rights Act was passed, and the 1968 Fair Housing Bill was passed. And since that time, you've seen significant galloping increases in black voter participation, and our country still is fighting the battle against racism and disparities in health and many other areas. But we have ended legal segregation, and it's because of the hard work of African Americans and others. And in many ways, that big turning point was the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Take pride in it. It's something to think about and something that we all should study in greater detail. African American History Month, everybody. It's worth your time. Dig into it, study it. Thank you very much.